And so I made a video on the Omar Isuf channel, and yes, that sounds as surreal to me as it does to you, about muscle fibers and muscle growth. Here is a scientifically accurate reconstruction of how motor units are innervated and muscle fibers activated. Trademark, and I've linked that down below, and I've also linked it in the top right corner of this video with that little eye icon, so you can click through to Omar's video at any point that you wish. And I would greatly appreciate anyone who has the time to go and view that video. Very much like to thank Mr. Omar Isuf for his kindness and support that he's given me to allow this slightly weird and awkward person on his channel.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
And so with a topic as vast as this, of course, I cannot cover every aspect relating to these different forms of cardio. However, like any good Amazon drone, I will try and deliver the main package of information to you, which I genuinely believe can help people. There's so much bias that I see and lack of balance towards this issue on social media, where people will disproportionately push one specific type of cardio as being best for fat loss. And so please remember, there is no generic best. There are advantages and disadvantages to each protocol, and ultimately it comes down to your personal preference. You can lose fat using both protocols, and you can go absolutely nuts and use a mixture of both. Oh, testimonial time. Bro, he's an entertainer. He gives legit advice when he needs to. You are as funny as a scrawny bald man standing alone with a mic. That is really hurtful. Bringing the microphone into this. It's okay. It's okay. But seriously, Bradley's spine doesn't know it's entertainment is the answer that I always use to try and remove the love hearts from these fanboys' eyes and make them realize the real danger that their heroes are performing on camera. And by the way, not only does this little model dude help me to visualize concepts, but he's also a sick gamer.
Back to business.
And so HIIT stands for How Insane Is This Cardio, or High Intensity Interval Training, which are essentially short bursts of high intensity work interlaced with short rest periods. And during this protocol, you'll have a variable heart rate, which will get high during your work intervals. I think the technical term for HIIT training is going balls to the wall, followed by I need air, oh, this sucks. And so really when we think of HIIT training, the main benefit is time efficiency. And it may also be more exciting to people, which can help with your adherence and ultimately your consistency of training over time. Those pesky and important intangible factors. And steady state cardio, which is boring. I'm just joking. Am I? Yes, I am. Or am I? No, I'm not. Am I? Which is a more consistent, longer duration and steady heart rate protocol. What excites one person may be different to what excites another person. But this is what excites me. Oh, the briefcase sound. Briefcase. And so when it comes to what is the best protocol for fat loss, HIIT or steady state, the actual question is completely redundant unless you have the correct fat loss protocols in place, such as a caloric deficit with your nutrition. And so assuming you have the scientific principles of fat loss tucked nicely under your pillow, my simple answer is that you can lose fat with both, and it will come down to your personal preference, but also what I would term lifestyle, situation, and training needs. And so initial considerations with what form of cardio you may use will be your time availability, it will be your other forms of training such as your resistance training, and leg days and HIIT go together about as well as exercise science as material for comedy. Damn it. How are you fitting your cardio into your weekly training and monthly training? Perhaps the equipment available to you, your history of injury. If you have some sort of joint issues, you may tend to go towards a lower impact form of cardio, which you can program through HIIT and steady state. And as a powerful caveat, you don't have to do cardio for fat loss. It can be a very effective protocol as you can burn a considerable amount of calories with cardio, but it is not compulsory. And I do have a video touching on that relating to information from Dr. Brad Schonfeld. Aerobic exercise is not necessary for fat loss, and unless you commit a lot of time to it on a daily basis, its overall effects will be modest. Adherence to an energy restricted diet is always the primary fat loss strategy from a practical standpoint. Moreover, resistance training is essential and thus more important than aerobic exercise for maintaining or even increasing lean mass during energy restriction. That said, cardio can be used in combination with diet and lifting to enhance fat loss, and it has numerous other health-related benefits as well. Just don't expect to hit the treadmill a few times a week and shred fat. Well, that was a mouthful. That's what he said. Got to mix up the primary school jokes. Dr. Schonfeld does give this information in more formal documents than a Facebook post. However, I felt as though that phrase was easy to digest, and you may disagree with parts of it, you may agree with parts of it. What is important is the context and the depth and the understanding that there are many variables involved in fat loss, and so cardio in isolation is not a hack. Of course, it has to be in conjunction with the other factors of fat loss, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video. And also, cardio should not just be related to fat loss. Of course, cardiovascular exercise has many benefits to it in relation to your heart health and other areas. And one problem is there's so much research out there which can lead you to believe that one form of cardio is uniquely superior to the other. And so, as always, please remember that research is a contribution to a knowledge base, and you really have to read between the lines, be critical when you read it. And so steady state cardio, in my opinion, is incorrectly classified as low intensity cardio. I believe it should be known as lower intensity cardio, because there still needs to be a level of intensity to steady state cardio work. One major problem that I see in gyms are people doing this super slow cardio for several hours. And for me, that's just not time efficient or effective when we're looking at programming our cardio into our training. And so when we think about intensity, we have a figure of around 63% of your VO2 max, which is seen as an effective exertion level to be burning fat. Your VO2 max being a measurement of your maximal oxygen uptake. But again, you don't need to overthink that or suffer from paralysis by analysis. Just make sure if you are doing steady state, there is a level of intensity and hard work and challenge to it. And very simple ways of doing this is, for example, increasing the incline on a treadmill or increasing the resistance setting on an elliptical or bike, for example. And one reason that I've recently taken up endurance training is not just for the physical benefits, but also for the mental benefits and the discipline. And I do suck at it, because these intangible factors, such as developing a discipline through your training, are also important considerations. And so when we think of steady state cardio, one of the benefits that's attributed to it is that it uses a higher proportion of fat as fuel during the session. And that is correct. However, we have to be very careful. And we also have to understand that if we're using one substrate during a session, such as more fat for fuel, lower intensity uses more fat for fuel, not 100% fat for fuel, whereas higher intensity HIIT training uses more carbohydrate for fuel. However, energy substrates are not linear. If you're using more of one substrate, such as fat, during a steady state cardio session, your body may then use more carbohydrate after the exercise session. And we have research from Paoli 2011 which can help us to understand this concept. So using a mixture of fats and carbohydrates for fuel in your sessions and in your sort of daily life around those sessions. And so don't fixate on the fact that you're using more fat as fuel during a session as being uniquely and significantly beneficial for steady state cardio. Literally explaining that concept using an apple caused a ridiculous amount of fanboys to start screeching at me a few years ago. That post-exercise period can be overlooked. Fat loss is an ongoing long-term process. It is a journey. And so when we look at certain cardio protocols acutely with a short-term lens, just during the time you're performing it, compared to taking a step back and looking at fat loss over many days and weeks, the picture is very different. Yes, fat oxidation may be higher when we take a short-term look at steady-state cardio during a session, and even perhaps up to 6 hours after a session. But when we look at fat loss in context of 24 hours and that session, we can see that the benefits of fat oxidation and steady-state lower-intensity cardio start to disappear and even level off with HIIT training. Over many weeks, we can essentially see that HIIT training and steady state cardio have similar fat oxidation results to them. And actually at this point, when we take a more chronic view, we can suggest that actually HIIT training then takes over as perhaps being more beneficial for overall fat burning and also other factors such as maintaining your lean muscle mass. And so it's very important to take a step back from fitness processes like this to get a fuller picture, kind of like one of those magic eye things where you have to stand back from the picture to really see the image. Let's just say with my eyesight, those magic eyes are not my strong point. An advantage of steady state cardio is you can perhaps recover better in relation to HIIT training, where you may take longer to recover because after all, HIIT training is high intensity. It causes great stress on the body and can mean that you take longer to recover from. However, if you are performing HIIT training, you can think about this and you will decrease the frequency of your HIIT sessions, how many times per week you perform those HIIT sessions. You can also make your HIIT sessions lower impact. For example, using a stationary bike as opposed to a treadmill. Another example could be perhaps you're training to failure on many of your exercises in your resistance training, and therefore using HIIT in accordance with this throughout your training week may not be suitable in terms of recovery. And another consideration is Epoc, which stands for excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. I literally could not think of any nonsensical alternative for that one, but your comments are welcome below. And in essence, this relates to HIIT training. Because it's such an intense form of training, you create an oxygen debt. Your body needs to take in oxygen post-workout to return the mechanisms and systems of your body to a point of homeostasis. Basically, your body freaks out when it's out of whack. And by doing this, your body will burn some extra calories to restore the processes of the body back to a more normal level. However, although that is a correct statement, the actual significance of Epoc is vastly overemphasized in much fitness communication, and actually the amount of calories that you burn from Epoc is relatively low.
And there are various studies looking into Epoc, for example intensity, where intensity is shown as the determining factor for Epoc, not duration of exercise. Also how long Epoc lasts and the actual caloric burn vary according to your specific characteristics, your age, your weight, your body composition, the exact training you undertook. And actually it's somewhere between around 7 to 14% of the actual calories that you burn within your training. So, for example, if you burn 200 calories within your high intensity training, the lower approximation would be an extra 14 calories burnt post-workout, whereas the higher approximation of 14% would be 28 calories burnt post-workout.
And another consideration and benefit of HIIT training can be that it's more time efficient and you may be burning more calories in a lesser amount of time. But even that concept is nuanced because again, it depends on the person. How hard are you actually performing in your HIIT sessions? How honest with yourself are you being? And so that can affect the amount of calories you burn. And in addition, what duration can you maintain that intensity for during a HIIT session in relation to a steady state session, which will generally have a longer duration? And also in your interval training, what sort of rest periods are you taking? How long are those rest intervals, which again can affect your overall calorie burn? Another factor with steady state cardio is you can actually increase the network of capillaries, which are used in nutrient transfer, as well as increasing mitochondria, which of course is where fat oxidation takes place. And this can have many benefits, for example, for recovery by having this more efficient nutrient transport system. And this can have, for example, knock-on benefits, which may relate to performing your resistance training. Another consideration is that HIIT can actually be fairly similar to resistance training protocols in that you're doing a high intensity form of work with rest intervals in between. And so HIIT training may be redundant to your training program anyway, because you may be performing regular and intense resistance training. And so, for example, if you look at factors such as your time availability that you can train throughout a week, you may make the decision that you don't need HIIT training. Wholly HIIT, that is an interesting factor to consider. And so these are all factors for you to think about, to be creative with your planning and to program for yourself. And so I really hope this video was useful to you and may benefit you in some way. I'm James Linker. This is the Shredded Sports Science. Thank you so much for watching the channel and the continued support and engagement. I will see you soon.
But be that as it may, I have a fantastic video for you today. I have a collab with none other than Shredded Sports Science, James.